In today's video, you will see a beautiful, beautiful game of mine that I played when I was only 10 years old. I was playing in the open category of the Dutch Youth Championships. More or less classical time control. It's a little bit in between rapid and classical, but this was considered the classical youth championships. And the reason why I participated in the open section is, well, first of all, I won the girls section the previous year. And second of all, I wanted to feel challenged and also win the open section this time. And I had really big chances, so why not? So in this game, I was facing one of the favorites. They were among 5 players that were pretty much favorites that had big chances to fight for the title. I was one of them, so this meant that it was going to be a really important game. Let's see how this went. So I was playing with the white pieces against Sven Dijkhuis, and this is how the game went. Mind you, this was in 2010. It's crazy that this game was almost 13 years ago. Wow. All right, so I played, of course, the move e4. My opponent played move d5, which is the Scandinavian. I took queen takes d5, knight c3, queen a5. This is all very standard. Knight f3, knight f6, d4, taking control of the center and preparing the move bishop d2 to kick away the queen from the square. Bishop f5, a very normal developing move. Bishop d2, of course. And here black plays move c6 because you want to give some squares for that queen. You want to retreat to either c7 or maybe even to d8 if you really want to. But typically the queen goes back to c7. Here I played the move bishop c4, also simply developing my piece. And here e6. Very logical move because now the bishop will be able to develop. h3 was played, knight bd7, and here I played the move knight to d5. And this may seem really crazy and odd, but the simple idea is that my bishop is attacking the queen. It's a discovery attack. Unfortunately for me, I'm not really winning material because this knight on f6, which I'm attacking, is really well defended by the knight and the pawn. So I'm not particularly winning material here, but I probably thought it was a cool move and a good idea to trade some pieces because let's be real, this knight on c3 is not really doing much and I don't really have a better discovery attack. If I go to b5, I'll have to retreat because the queen will simply go to either d8 or b6. So for that reason, knight d5 makes a bit of sense, but perhaps not the best move. So yeah, knight d5, and my opponent played move queen d8. Very logical, of course. I took on f6, knight takes f6, and here I improved the position of my bishop. I played bishop f4. Seems pretty logical so far. Bishop e7, and here queen d2. I'm giving myself the option of going either short castle or long castle. So yeah, I'm keeping my options open, and since a Scandinavian can be pretty boring, especially if I go short castle here, then yeah, it kind of makes sense. I want to spice things up and play long castle instead. So let's see what little Anna-Maja decided to do here. It's black's moves first, so black played short castle. I played bishop d3. It's a bit of a strange move, but I'm guessing that little Anna-Maja was a bit terrified of this bishop and she was thinking of going long castle. And once you play long castle, perhaps you need to play c3 at some point to defend some squares and this pawn on d4, and that may mean that this bishop can be pretty annoying. So I have a feeling that, you know, trading off these bishops would be what was in my mind. And also like this after takes, which actually happened, I'm also taking control of the square on e4, which was accessible by this knight. So that way I'm limiting my opponent's opportunities basically. So here my opponent played queen b6 and I went long castle. There we go. Let's spice things up in this very boring opening. Even at this age, I was already aware of the fact that this opening is just really boring. My opponent goes for a5, very logical, attacking on the queen side now towards my king. I played queen b3, and it's interesting to see that I'm offering the trade of queens. It seems like I was pretty scared of this queen side attack, and I thought my attack would be perhaps less efficient or less effective. So yeah, it was a good moment, I guess, to offer the trade and see what my opponent would do here. My opponent didn't decide to trade. Queen a6 was played, and now I played the move Queen d3. Again, offering the trade. I'm not sure what my plan was here. I'm just chasing down my opponent's queen, and my queen already came from d3, so I don't think I was aware whatsoever of any sort of repetitions or something. At this age, I didn't really go for draws whatsoever. I want to go for a win, but it seems like that at this moment I seemed pretty clueless. It's okay, little Anna-Maja, you're forgiven. But my opponent played move b5. So I gave my opponent a free move, actually 2 free moves. I allowed my opponent to play queen a6 and b5. So that's not really efficient, Anna-Maja. That's not really efficient, but it's fine because this made me realize that I should maybe start attacking on the king's side. Perhaps I should start attacking on the king's side. Let's see how this actually continues, because my opponent played move a4. I play a3. So this looks a bit strange on one hand, because you typically don't want to move any of those pawns in front of your king, because when you do that, you're weakening some squares and you're also weakening this pawn over here because it becomes a target. So a move like b4 comes to mind, but the problem of b4 is that you're offering a trade of queens, which I was desperately looking for. Perhaps I was really desperately looking for an opportunity to go to endgames, because I remember that when I was younger, I felt so confident in endgames. I was practicing endgames so much, so I really thought my chances were higher in endgames, I guess. So maybe that was the reasoning behind my desperate attempt of trading queens. Anyways, after a3, my opponent didn't play b4. Instead, queen b6 first, stepping out of this diagonal, of course. I played move bishop d2, trying to stop the move b4, as it seems like even though it still happened. I took on b4, my opponent takes, pawn takes, and queen takes b4. So yeah, this looks pretty good for black, I should say. It looks pretty convincing. The b2 pawn is a target. This a pawn has the potential to move to a3, and those rooks can stand on those open files and start attacking. So at the same time, I don't really have the same opportunities. It looks a little bit shaky on my end. So let's see how I manage to get out of this, because it looks pretty devastating. I played with queen a3. There we go again. Let's trade some queens, shall we? No, my opponent's not in for this. Queen b7 was played. So this is actually starting to, you know, change things up. Perhaps it wasn't such a bad idea to trade. Of course, I would still have like a lot of counterplay. This pawn on c6 is weak and stuff. But perhaps, you know, because queen a3, this queen is stopping the pawn from moving on a4 and also defends the pawn on b2. So this makes it pretty difficult for my opponent to attack, actually. Anyways, queen b7 was played here. I played the move knight e5. Very typical, of course, as knight belongs on square e5 pretty much. Rook fd8 was played. I played the move f4, and here my opponent played knight d5 because, well, my pawn on f4 is pretty weak, so why not attack it, right? So my opponent attacked the pawn f4, and I played the move f5. So I'm now going for it. You know, black doesn't have an attack anymore pretty much. You can still try some stuff, involve the knight somehow, move the rook, but it's a little bit slow. So yeah, why not start attacking myself now? My opponent took, I took on f5, rook db8, rook hg1, and here I'm already trying to set something up here. Ooh, it's getting tricky over here, and my opponent fell right into it. My opponent played the move knight c7, a huge mistake, and it's not so clear on the spot why this is a huge mistake, because the idea is clear. You want to start perhaps either defending by playing knight e8, knight f6, or you want to play knight b5 and kick away this queen out of here and start pushing the pawn to a3, so you can checkmate the opponent yourself with the black pieces. But the problem here is that the king on g8 is completely undefended. The only defenders here are the pawns on h7, g7, and f7. And those are not good enough defenders. You need a bit more few pieces to cover some of the threats. Psst, Anna-Maja, the editor here. Pause the solve if you want to figure out what is the move here for white. And here is the brilliant move that I played here. I sacrificed the rook on g7. I sacrificed the rook, and I'm asking my opponent, do you want to take it or not? Because, well, if they don't really take, then of course I have a really crushing attack. So they, of course, have to take, so I will have to prove how this is actually winning. So my opponent takes on g7, I play rook g1 check, king f6. I played the move queen d6 here, which is not so good as the other moves that were possible here, because those were following to checkmate, whereas this is just winning material, because after knight e6, knight d7 check, black is forced to take on d7, sacrifice the queen, because after king takes f5, it is simply checkmate on e5. So that's why black is forced to give up the queen, and this was reason enough for my opponent to resign after the move knight d7. However, I will show you how it was actually forced mate if I would have played something else than queen d6. There's two ways of leading to a forced mate, but the quickest way is checkmate in 7. So after this move, knight d7 check, black is in check, has to take on f5. There's no other move possible. And here I was supposed to play rook f1 check. And it's absolutely crazy that this is leading to a forced checkmate. I mean, the king is completely exposed, of course, but it's crazy to see that all those pieces are just so useless. They cannot help whatsoever. So here, of course, black has a couple of moves. The best move to try to escape is the move king to e6. Of course, you can also try to go to e4 and g6 and g5. And this is what makes it look so scary, right? Because there's so many different moves and you have to figure out for every single move what is going on. Let's go through the quickest checkmates over here. So let's try king e4. What is happening here? So here there's two different ways of checkmating. One of the ways is queen f3, and after takes there's queen d3 checkmate. Look how beautiful this checkmate pattern is. The knight is taking away those squares and the queen is taking all the other squares pretty much. So that's a beautiful checkmate pattern. That is one. Now let's go to g5. g5 and g6 are pretty much the same, as in that you can give a check on g3. The king goes either to h5 or h6. Let's say h5. For example, okay, you have rook f5 or queen g4. There's just so many different ways of winning here. But the standard way is that rook f5, king h6, queen g5. If the king would have gone to h6, then of course, likewise, we have rook f6, king h5, queen g4. So yeah, same story, pretty much, checkmate in a similar fashion. And what about if the king goes to e6? This is the main line, because this is not just checkmate in 2 or 3 moves. This is still checkmate in 5 moves, so you still have to figure out what to do here. White is supposed to play rook f6 here, sacrificing another piece. Of course, if you go to d5, you're running into a quicker checkmate. King d5, queen c5 check, king e4, and queen e5 checkmate. The king has no squares available, so that's why, of course, you take. Why not? If you can take. Rook takes f7 is the winning move. And yeah, once again, black has a lot of opportunities here, but they all lead to the same checkmate. So for example, if king goes back, queen e7, the queen comes in and checkmates on d7, so that is no bueno, and that's why you want to try to run away. You want to try to run away, go to e6. After king e6, you play queen e7, king d5 is met by queen e5, and after king c4, it is checkmate on c5. And this is how it was forced mate after this beautiful rook sacrifice. It is pretty crazy that at the young age of 10, I was able to figure out something like this. It's not that straightforward, of course, and I have to note, I don't remember the time control particularly, but it was definitely less than like what we're used to in classical. It was around 30 minutes, 25 minutes. It's closer to rapid, but because in like we're so young in the category under 10, there were still a lot of like 7, 8, 9-year-olds playing. So I guess this was like the championship where we had longer time than usual than in other events like Blitz and Rapid. Anyways, I'm really proud of this win. It was a really beautiful, amazing win. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment down below to let me know what you thought of this game, what you thought of the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.